Okay, we're live again. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Olga Bolotina. I am one of my hats as a Sierra Club leader and the chair of Applegate chapter of the Sierra Club. And in the know, been going on for last year. We're sort of approaching our anniversary, which I appreciate you all joining us almost every week. And I'm so honored to speak with people who are doing real work in real life in real time on sustainability and environmental issues, environmental justice issues. And one of my dear colleagues and friends in becoming is Chris Applegate from Colorado, who is on the executive committee of the Colorado Sierra Club chapter, and also been absolute immense resource to me personally and to SFB chapter as part of the chapter support staff. So many of you know the Sierra Club is a elaborate structure, and a lot of questions always arise. So Chris has been always there for us and willing and able and to answer, to help and jump right in. So Chris also been leading a lot of outings, which I'm assuming Chris now is probably all shut down because Sierra Club is under strict guidelines not to do outdoor or assembly activities, which is prudent under COVID, obviously. So I'm wondering what you're doing instead, other than helping all the chapters in your purview, which is what all the chapters all over the states. So thank you so much for joining me. And yes, what do you do right now when you cannot lead the groups into the wilderness?
Thanks for having me, Olga. So right now, our big focus, I've been re-engaging a lot of new volunteers on our public lands team. That's one of the big things that we are focused on, which we're looking at two federal bills that we would like to see get passed in the coming Congress. And we're also looking at the last remaining river that is not dammed in Colorado, the Crystal River, and creating a wild and scenic designation for it. So, and it's one of the tributaries to the Colorado River. So I was just on a call this morning with one of our volunteers in the local community about it. So there's more to come. We're still implementing what our strategy fully looks like, but we're really getting excited to re-engage volunteers and activists across the state to keep them engaged with a new administration and a new Congress so that we can make meaningful progress towards saving 30% of our public lands by 2030.
My God, no skipping beats, Chris just launching right into getting stuff done. I love it. No nonsense. Well, thank you so much. And I forgot to mention that you're the chair of the Public Lands Committee of the Colorado chapter. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So great work. Which, of course, the Colorado chapter is covering the whole state. Is that the case?
Yes.
You don't have several chapters, or just one chapter of the Sierra Club. Okay.
One chapter for the whole state.
Which is a lot of state, a lot of ground to, yeah. In California, we have 13 chapters, and within each chapter, we have 6, 8 groups. So it's very, it's very elaborate, layered structure. But so new administration, obviously you're involved. So any hope? Somebody was just interviewing me for, it's like, what are your hopes for new administration? I was like, where do I start? So what are your hopes?
Well, we've already seen some meaningful progress already within the first 2 weeks. We've seen a pause on federal leasing for oil and gas on all federal lands. We have seen a commitment by the administration to preserving 30% of public lands by 2030 and putting together some work there to see how we achieve that in the next decade. And We've also seen multiple climate proposals, with rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement and other initiatives that the administration has already been pushing forward, as well as we're seeing some bills being reintroduced that have been introduced in the previous Congress that will help us achieve those very goals.
Wow. Yes, and of course you were working also on the Keystone pipeline to stop the pipeline, which now is effectively stopped. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was one of my very first campaigns, like national campaigns of the Sierra Club that I got involved with 10 years ago. I've not been active with it for a number of years in really any meaningful way, but when I was living in the state of Oklahoma, I was greatly involved in the campaign there with Sierra Club.
Did you go actually there and protest, or did you?
Yeah, so I was on a volunteer team there. I didn't go to any specific protests for the Keystone in Oklahoma, but I did I did go to like a State Department hearing, which had like, golly gee, over 100, not 100, over 1,000 people probably at this meeting.
Wow.
And went and spoke at that. I also helped with creating, getting people engaged with the work, created some maps because my background, my day job is geospatial analytics. And I was able to create some maps of kind of the proposed boundary of that and how it might intersect with tribal lands across Oklahoma and private lands and so forth. So that all of my engagement with Keystone was really back in the early days of my involvement with Sierra Club.
Early days, when were the early days?
Yeah, so I began my journey in Sierra Club in 2011.
Oh, wow.
And that's in Oklahoma, started in Norman, Oklahoma with the work there. And by 2013, I was showing up at national meetings in San Francisco, and the history is still unfolding on what that is, and all the learnings I've had over the last decade of that. It's been amazing.
Hey, anniversary, wink, wink, we have to celebrate 2021. I know,
That's
big
true.
party.
Celebrate these things.
Hey, you know what? Whatever we can celebrate, I feel like we should. Zoom or not, I've been, going to some Zoom parties, like dance parties. I was like, damn, this is really good, actually. Yes, you cannot hug people, and you cannot, couple dance or pair dance, whatever. But still, the energy is there, and people are enjoying it. So hey, I'm counting on the party. Sierra Club party. So you mentioned that you lived in Oklahoma, but sort of going back, I always like to start with sort of early days because I've been saying that for a while, and it's true. I think the childhood forms us so much. Why we choose to volunteer, why we choose to do certain things or not to do certain things. I think it all stems from childhood. So tell me the story. Where did you grow up? What is the early Chris life look like?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Southwest Missouri and in a tourist town called Branson, Missouri. So we were, a town of less than 10,000 people, but we had almost 1 million visitors a year. So it was very busy during the summer months. And I grew up with two parents who worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet for me and my two siblings. And they were very hard workers my whole life. We weren't, the highest income earners by any stretch of the imagination. And I grew up in the Branson United Methodist Church as well, which is that is where I did my first bit of volunteering, was through church. And I had a church family there with a lot of friends. And my grandma was a big component of that, to ensuring that I got to church and everything. But I think all of that, like the hard work that I experienced from all parts of my family to my church life, kind of culminated into something that I guess I created out of all of that, out of all those experiences, because I had an interest at a young age with the outdoors. Even though I grew up in a more rural community, I grew up in the Ozark Mountains. I never went hiking. We did some
Mm.
camping. We did some outdoor trips to a few places, but my family wasn't in particular into like hiking,
Mm.
doing kind of what you think the outdoor industry, when you see imagery of what it means to be someone who's outdoors is like. Um, my outdoor experience was playing in the dirt in the garden, with my little micro machines. It was uh, driving in the car. I remember,
Micro machines.
yeah, little cars, micro machine cars. And I also like would imagine myself with a little green thumb from the troll in Central Park, related to that movie, where I would pretend like when we're driving down in the car, like the electric poles, like I could magically turn them into trees and return a home into a pasture. That was stuff that I would do just like driving down like the neighborhood or something. So I think my interest in that, I don't, I was just interested in the outdoors. I loved the outdoors, even though I wasn't going to like remote areas, or anything like that. It was very much like places close to town. It was just within
Mhm.
my world view. I never saw mountains until high school. uh,
Mm.
and it uh, and somehow along the way I remember looking up global warming on my computer that we got at home, and that is how kind of a lot of things like I think culminated with the church life of volunteering, the hard work of my family, and then this interest of always being outdoors as a kid and playing outdoors, playing tag, playing in the dirt. All that has just culminated into where college came. And it seems like a lot of that finally came together, where I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, so I like the outdoors. I like, hard work, the volunteering component. Got involved with the environmental organization on campus called Our Earth. And
Mm.
that's where I started to blossom a bit more into the activist that I am today. But I feel like it's all about building blocks, from a child of all those little interests to college to my family and friends that I've created along the way. All these experiences have led me to now.
Wow. Well, and my God, you mentioned so much there that I can relate to. Also, my in the influence of my grandmother in my life, who I definitely would not be the person that I am today. Which, I'm a human being. I have my good and bad days and sides, but overall, I know I'm always aiming to be the best I can be for myself and for others. And that love for nature was definitely inspired by my grandmother, who started taking me to wilderness, basically mushroom and berry picking, when I was like, I don't know, just born really. And I was born in April, and I think the same summer we went to Dacha, the Russian sort of second country house for the summer. So yeah, it's but you said you lived in mountains, but you didn't see. I might have gotten confused there. You said that you lived in the mountains, but you didn't see the mountains until high school. What did you mean there?
Yes. So the Ozark, we call them the Ozark Mountains. They are the
Hmm.
oldest mountains in the country, if I recall right. And they are now like it's hill country. So whenever I say like I haven't seen a mountain, like a mountain to me was like very big, had snow on top of it, like I'd never seen
Mm.
anything like that. Where I grew up, it was hill country. A lot of that, we call it the Ozark Mountains locally. maybe referred to as the Ozark Hills,
I see.
but we but it depends on what you want to call them. I think in northwestern Arkansas is where some of them get to be like actual by geography terms, a
Standards
mountain because they rise.
mountains. I see.
But I didn't live in like standard mountain country by any means. Not like I do now here in Colorado.
Yeah. Uh, do you mind me asking, what did your parents do? That you mentioned that they worked quite a bit.
Yeah, so my dad worked in construction and also for a lumber company. And he did side jobs throughout my entire life growing up, building decks,
Mm.
sheds on the side, just, to help make ends meet. My mom, she worked a variety of like retail jobs. She worked at a dry cleaner. She's worked at retail places. She's had second jobs. She's gotten after
Oh.
work cleaning jobs that me and my siblings helped with every now and then as well. Again, three kids, and they did their best to help make ends meet for us growing up.
It's so funny. Every conversation I have, there's just so many similarities. Because my father, he's an engineer and worked in the engineering firm in Russia. In whatever. I was born in '75, so he was already working back then. He worked in the same company for 40 years, but on the side, during summers, he and his buddies were going to countryside to help build houses to earn some more money. And of course, in Russia, we didn't have credit. So if you wanted to buy, let's say, of course, my father was dreaming of owning a car. You had to earn that money to actually buy a car. You didn't have credit. And my mom was also, she's an engineer, but she worked in the school. And then on the side, she was sewing to also make ends meet. So interesting. Why I'm sometimes bringing up those parallels, because the song, Russians love their children too. I just always want to sort of bridge that gap when we're talking about countries, especially with so much sort of building up animosity between Russia and the United States. I was like, governments fight, but people really are preoccupied with the same things, all of us. So there are more similarities than yeah. What is the role of religion in your life? I mean, I never heard that you grew up helping in church and go to services. What role does it play in your life now?
Yeah. So right now, I still identify as a Christian. I believe in God, and I have overall, like since I moved to Denver, I've played a less active role. I um, found a Methodist church here in Denver for my first few years, and then I kind of moved and haven't been going to that one in particular. And I've been kind of around my roommate. She is my old roommate. She was uh, going to the Unitarian church, and I have a few friends that go to a few different Methodist churches here in the Denver metro area that I have attended. I've been
Mm-hmm.
attending virtually um, a few church services with a few Methodist church. So I identify mainly with going to the Methodist church, but I am not someone that's opposed or closed-minded to how other identities within the religious spectrum show up and
Mm-hmm.
practice their religion. And I would say overall, I just haven't been as active, of course, in going. Now that I've lived in Colorado, I kind of get outdoors more on my Sundays. But recently, during the pandemic, I have been listening outside of your Sundays to church services a little bit more often, because a lot of times with our politics today, it gives me a grounding when I
Mm-hmm.
hear a message from a pastor um, about the good in people, about where we all come from. A lot of that really relates to me on how I want to live my life, um, and being a good person and not judging folks. But we're all human. We all do that in some way, shape, or form. And I have my vulnerabilities with all of that. But yeah, that's kind of where I sit today with my religion.
You mentioned that you do attend services. Do you do any other practices? Because especially, you're right, especially now, I think. Well, I mean, it was funny. I was watching Trevor Noah show. Yeah, I love him. It's like, oh, wait a second. We had a lot of disagreement and this time and that time and oh, and wait, and that time. So there's always been disagreement, but sort of this period in time with COVID and with what's going on in this country and around the world, there's a lot of sort of disconnect and a lot of sort of fighting. So what are the practices that you have on a daily basis or however regularly you have them, to ground yourself also?
You mean like just in general, though?
Just to ground yourself in that reminding of goodness of yourself and people. I think also being kind to yourself. That's what I think people a lot of times missing. You cannot be kind to other people unless you learn to be kind to yourself, which is a challenge.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's been eye opener, I think, with my engagement with Sierra Club in a lot of ways, and with
Mm.
friends and family, and my life experience that I've had now for a few decades. Um, that what I do to try to ground myself back into that is looking at other folks on how they present themselves, and how do I take a
Mm.
message of, from whether it be from church, whether it be from Michelle Obama's like when they go low, we go high, to to the beautiful poetry that Amanda Gorman had at the inauguration. That there may be division, there may be a lot of that, but as you noted, Olga, it's been going on well before this time,
Mm.
even worse. Um, and I like to
Mhm.
think, whenever I try to ground myself, I try to bring myself back to that. And something, I just got done reading a book about how to have dialogue and how you ask questions, whether you're trying to get an answer that you want or whether you're actually asking a question based out of curiosity. And that
Mhm.
is a lot of with our, when with community norms. And if folks don't know what community norms are, just like a set of principles that you as a team or a community or um, whatever volunteer staff team you might be on can develop, that make sure that everyone's on the same page on how you show up to that space. And that is, I try to bring myself back to some of that in terms of, am I
Mhm.
listening? Like, uh am I asking the right questions? Am I talking too much? Am I not letting someone else speak up? How do I show up for other folks? And how do I have empathy? I think empathy is something that I have been really trying to get better at, because I don't have the same experience as you. I don't have the same experience as
Mhm.
anyone around me. But how can I have that empathy, with those individuals, of their lived experiences? Because I grew up in a culture, I feel, that was very much, because my parents worked really hard, right? They worked all these extra jobs, like,
Mhm.
so part of me is like, oh, I just have to work really hard and I'll get far in life. Or I was always told I had to go to college. Like, there was no question about it. I was going to college.
Mhm.
Um, and what does that look like to be more empathetic to communities, where it's not this, you always have to be running. because we all can't run at the same speed, and there's a lot of hurdles in the way. You know, there's mud, there's a river, there's a mountain ahead, and there's all different things that we have to deal with along the way. And so I'm trying to ground myself better in experiences, having empathy, and I want to have more dialogue this year. That's something that I've reached out to 4 people who are like more conservative already this year to try and have more dialogue with them. No one has taken me up on the offer yet, but I'm trying. I am trying to put myself out there because I am eager and I'm hungry for dialogue, that hopefully we can do more listening. And can I also practice humility when I am wrong and say, no, you were right. I was wrong. And I apologize, and try to practice more of that in our daily lives, in my life.
Oh, Chris, I have to say, I'm listening to you. It's like everything you say is like music to my ears. I guess you gave me the response that I wanted to, even though I asked out of curiosity. Right? It, there's so much to it, and I have a family member also that who's a conservative. And we're trying not to touch on politics or anything of that sort, because it becomes triggering. It's interesting how, and I'm trying to figure out how to find that, because find common ground, or at least the way to talk about the things that we agree disagree without flaming that huge argument, and there's, I think, the assumption on both sides that I noticed that person has an assumption that I, or people who agree with me, are going to attack that person, and sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm going to be just automatically attacked. So I think that sort of trying to alleviate those assumptions or dispelling those assumptions, I think, is one of the first steps to actually having a dialogue. It's like, hey, let's just, exactly to your point, ask questions. And and also something that you said is that I've been contemplating quite a bit on, especially last year. And I think that leadership positions really put you in that state of, why and what is my intention in everything that I'm saying or doing. Is like, you're not ever going to get things, you're not always going to get things right. Most, and it's like, I realized that if you're doing something and trying to change something, people are going to be mad with you, period. It's just like, you have to really make peace with that almost. But I found for myself that the intention that I bring to anything I do is immensely important, because it changes, and clarity on your intention changes how good I sleep at night, and how clear my conscience is, and how I communicate, and how things are received. So interesting that what you were saying made me think. And compassion, oh my God, empathy, compassion, where to meet people where they are, and ability to walk the walk. And again, I'm coming to compassion for your own self, which I have to say, growing in Russia, growing in socialistic country also, we were not trained to have compassion for yourself. It's always consideration for others. It's always hard work. It's going to get you there, basically grind yourself to the pulp. And I found that self-care and self-compassion are immensely important if you want to get anywhere and not burn yourself out. Well, a lot of, you tapped into the topic that I actually am extremely passionate about: self-development, self-growth. I also wanted to ask you about the role sort of spirituality and groundedness, and sort of dealing with humans as humans, role of that in sustainability and environmental protection. Do you see the connection, and how do you see successful or not sustainability environmental movements in addressing or dealing with that humanity in us?
Yeah, well, this takes me back to I've had a few sermons that really stand out to me regarding uh, creation care. And I don't, have you heard that term before?
Mm-mm. No, I haven't heard that term.
Yeah, so creation care would be, or how it's been framed of how I've heard it and how I've learned about it is
Mm-hmm.
just like what Sierra Club does, like protecting, explore, enjoy, and protect the planet for both planet
Mm-hmm.
and for humans, right? And that is in line with what creation care is. Like God created this world, but not for us to just wipe, whole forests out for our taking. It is about
Mm-hmm.
sustainable. It's about caring for creation, caring for the tree, caring for the river, caring for each other. Ultimately, it's all
Mm-hmm.
intersectional, right? And I read a book by Jonathan Merritt, golly, almost 10 years ago now, called Green
Wow.
Light God. And it was a really great book for me in my early years because I've always been very interested in this intersectionality of religion and sustainability and creation care because I'm involved with Sierra Club, and I
Mm-hmm.
also consider myself a religious person, maybe not the most, by any means. I think it's all on a pendulum of, where you fall on that,
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But um, I wanted to identify like those intersections of how we can show up because the work that I do, a lot of the work, the work that I enjoy the most, anyways, with public land protection is very much about like, to me, caring for the planet that God created for us and being able to ensure that that land, in terms of, the intersectionality with how we define it as humans and even in our government, is that it's public lands.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we make sure that it's accessible equitably to people? And how do we help bridge the gap when it comes to divides, whether it might be racial divides, whether it be your abilities, whether it be your age, to be able to access public lands. So
Mm-hmm.
um, those are those things are all tied together, which people may not realize as much, but it's something that um, I started digging into a decade ago, and Sierra Club has really helped me hone in on like how that's all interconnected. But my overall experience is like, especially when a lot of folks have an idea that the more conservative you are, the more likely you are to maybe not be in favor of land protection or that we should do what we want to. At least that is those are thoughts out there, right? I'm not saying that's
Mm-hmm.
true because
Mm-hmm.
there are many people on the spectrum of ideologies that love our public lands and want to protect them. It's actually a very bipartisan issue. You look under the Trump administration and the Great Outdoors Act, it was called something along those lines, got passed, and signed. It
Mm-hmm.
was a huge bill for conservation under the Trump administration. Like we don't always like to talk about the positives there, but that was a positive thing that did occur in those 4 years in that realm of work that we do. Is there more to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Were there a lot of not so great things that happened over those 4 years? Absolutely. But I think to understand that it can be a bipartisan issue and that sometimes the framing of how we frame conversations with our audiences could
Mm-hmm.
be like, yes, protect the environment. That's easily sold with our base, right? The Sierra Club base. But then how do you work with other folks that might have different identities or
Mm-hmm.
ideologies and maybe create care there's another avenue for that.
Well, you mentioned something that actually made me also sort of reflect on the language use. And I always say, how can we message everything, communicate better? You know, I'll give you an example. We're calling public lands, which is very sort of like public. You know, I don't identify necessarily when people saying public, kind of like, oh, it's me. You know. So how can we use the language that people feel, not the ownership in the sense of I own that land, don't walk on it, but it's like our lands. Maybe we should call it our lands. So people feel that, hey, you know, that this is not somebody's, this is yours. You have, because you know, I it just pains me to know like the Bears Ears, you know, the a lot of parks, how they were vandalized, and we had a lot in California and Nevada, and we got all those reports how people were vandalizing trees and you know, just habitat. To me, it shows that people do not see natural environment as something that they should be taking care of and something that belongs to them. Also, it's like you mentioned that it always puzzles me in the religious community, especially because to me it's such a non-brainer. I mean, God created, if you believe that God created this planet, this earth, and all the creatures on it, you naturally want to respect God's creation and God's, you know, complexities and connections, and not take. So I don't know where that sort of consumption theory came from, that is now perpetuated by you know, conservatives, quite frankly, for the most part. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and how to overcome that, you know, from religious organizations also.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if
Yeah,
you hear your pastors talking about that or not, you know.
yeah, I wouldn't say I've heard a lot of it, and I would also come back to say that um, a lot of this is we hear it from people high up, and I feel like sometimes there's not sometimes, I think there's frequently a disconnection between who we hear about in the news talking about it, who's an elected
Mm-hmm.
official, versus people on the ground. Like, I love going fishing, I love being able to go out and camp here, um, and and that means some of the talking heads about it, like we have a pretty conservative person just got elected in Colorado, for a congressional district that covers a lot of the public lands we
Mm-hmm.
have. And um, I bet you that if you were to sit down with her, that you might find some common ground. Maybe not a whole lot, for me personally, but there might be some ways to have those conversations about our public lands. I was just on a call this morning about
Mm-hmm.
some of those issues with a constituent in that district. So I don't have an answer of how to bridge some of that, but I do think some of it might be that what we hear from the loudest folks
Mm-hmm.
is maybe not the right representation of the majority of folks. And that's where I would probably put that. And then your second piece that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned was public lands and how people relate to that term. And that's a really
Mm-hmm.
great question, because we also have to recognize that, when we're talking about a wilderness area or national park, public lands in general, those lands were not our lands. They were indigenous lands. And I think it's really exciting to see Deb Haaland as the first nomination to the Department of Interior,
Mm-hmm.
who is an indigenous woman. And we are very excited to see her nomination come forward here later this month and hopefully confirmed. She'll be a
I hope
great
so.
interior.
Mhm.
But I think we're getting better. Organizations like Sierra Club, we're getting better, but we're not there yet. We have far to go to understanding how we do better at promoting public lands in an equitable way. Is that the right term that we need to be using? Uh, is who's sitting at the table? Should some of our lands revert? Should some of the lands that are out there, not some of our lands, but some of the lands that currently the United States occupies, be returned back to tribal nations to manage themselves as the original caretakers of these lands. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but these are questions that we as a community in the outdoor industry and folks of us that advocate for public lands are thinking about more and more. And we don't necessarily have the answers. And how does it relate to other people? So how does it relate to low income families, or how does it relate to people that might have disabilities? How does it relate to people within different ethnicities or race? The words matter, visuals matter. How are our parks in San Francisco, right? Like, how are the parks? What do they, are they policed? Or do you have a lot of police presence? What does that mean to the community when you show up to a park and see that? When you go to the national park and you see a park ranger in their traditional outfit, is that imagery good for all the community of what that looks like, or should it be different? We need to be open to change. We need to be open to having more conversations about this and how we how we create a path forward in the advocacy, and also bridging these divides, whether it's through religion, whether it's through ideology, whether it's through identities.
I think what you were talking about earlier, empathy, comes to mind because a lot of times I think that it takes real effort to sort of understand and to become aware that your experiences are not universal experiences, that people, you don't know what you don't know about other people and what they came, you're right. What you said earlier is that we sort of judging, it sometimes automatically comes up, but so it takes real stepping back. It's like, okay, just because person looks certain way, you shouldn't be making assumptions. Really should be, listening and observing and understanding communities where people are coming from and what they come from. It's like, it's painful that in California, you mentioned San Francisco, but even, I live in Oakland, and I don't know why I'm getting emotional about it, but a lot of kids, we have amazing trails, we have ocean, but a lot of kids in Oakland never seen it because, parents just don't have the means, that they work several jobs. The public transit is not great. You wouldn't let probably a child, take a bus to the hills to take, a trail. I mean, like, it's not considered safe or potentially safe. So I think that when we organize, one of the stories that stood out for me, I did a sort of presentation at Unity Council here in Oakland, and we were talking about Sierra Club and environmental protection. One of the participants said, well, and there was real pain in her voice, and she's like, well, you know what, you advocated for retrofitting trucks in the Port of Oakland. And my father is a trucker. He had to shed, like $50,000 out of his pocket to retrofit his truck. That's real expense. Why did you not think about those things ahead of time and somehow help, people to absorb those costs? I think eventually people were reimbursed, but anyway, it was not thought about upfront how to bring those environmental protections that we also should care about in a way that people are also understood and taken care of. So it's interesting when you go into communities and when you're talking to people, it's like, wow, why did I not think about it before? But it really takes going to people and having those conversations. I mean, that you already mentioned. So we have a lot of work to do. That's for sure. But what are you excited about now? What are you mentioned the river, so you're blocking the damming of the river. Is there an effort to dam the river, or?
Yeah, no effort to dam the river right now. It's more about potentially like water in the West, everything really,
Mhm.
Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, over to California, right? We're all, water is a big issue for all of us.
Yeah.
Um, and what does that mean for rivers like the Crystal River to still be free flowing as it is today? And what does it mean 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 60 years from now? There
Mhm.
was an effort I just learned today. So I want to give credit to Delia Malone. She's a local Sierra Club volunteer who I just had this conversation with this morning. So the idea is there that we definitely want to work with a group of folks for this, but she was giving me a good update. So I want to make sure that she gets credit for this because this knowledge is her
Mhm.
knowledge. um,
Mhm.
and I'm excited about it, but we're it's early stages. I don't know how involved we're going to be yet. There's the Colorado Outdoor Recreation and Economic Act. There's the Colorado Wilderness Act. There's that are also federal bills that are being introduced. So there's some work on the federal level to
Mhm.
do, but well, that's all exciting. I think one thing that we don't talk about our outdoor spaces and support for them is how we're going to fund them, because parks
Mhm.
do have fees. John Muir National Monument, Yosemite, speaking of a few in California, that you have to have an annual, you have to pay a fee to get in.
And yeah.
We're also reaching a point where some of our parks are, there's a lot of people showing up to them. Parking
Mhm.
spaces are running out. Um, how do we balance like the need for people to connect to nature, but also protect the resources that we were meant to protect, and
Mhm.
ensure equitable access? That equitable access is like key and foremost on all of that. Of like, I know Muir Woods is putting like, now you have to reserve parking spots. Like you have a time frame, you show up.
Mhm.
Um, and what does that mean? What impact does that have on people who do wish to visit, especially those
Mhm.
that may not understand how to make a reservation like that? So those are some things that, like funding, um, we can, if we're going to achieve 30% by 2030, like protect 30% of our public lands, that means that we have to protect another 500 million lands and water. I should say not just lands, but water as well. Lands and water
Mhm.
in a decade. That's a lot. It's
Yeah.
completely doable, right? Um, I mean, we've already protected 300 million acres almost of land and water in the United States. So we can continue to do more. Um, but how do we fund it? What does that look like? But how, is funding it, how do we do it equitably? You know, that is
Mhm.
another key component of this. That's why I was bringing up the park fees and stuff. Like, if you really wanted to fund it, maybe you charge $100 to go to Muir Woods, but that's not very equitable when you think about creating access to a place like that. Like that is,
Yeah.
I would be 100% against. So um, I'm excited about the next couple of years overall. To get, I got on a little tangent. I apologize, but I think the
No,
most
you should
exciting
be.
is that we have an opportunity with our current Congress And I wish the Congress, the bill I talked about that passed under Trump, more things like that I wish could pass. Now I think there might be some division again. That bill was led by a Republican senator from my state who actually lost re-election in 2020. And the bill was, some might say, was passed because of political reasons to hopefully get him some votes that would get him reelected. It was not enough for him. But I am thankful the bill got passed. But how can we pass those bills without making it, I need votes? How can we make it a vote? Because we are in a climate crisis. We clearly need more lands that are accessible for folks to explore and enjoy. New places, highlighting new places, to spread folks out as our population does continue to grow, and finding a way to fund them so that we can manage them appropriately. So.
Well, I think that also, we're talking about the climate change, and again, I'm coming back to sort of linguistics and how we address the issues. How can we make it more personable to people? I think that, I am thinking about one particular person, friend of mine who's very conservative, and he's a hunter. But we had those conversations with him about protecting the environment. It's like, well, we do want to protect the environment because we realize that if we don't protect the environment, there's no animals for us to hunt, which I don't agree with hunting animals, but I see the point. So I think, how can we really structure the dialogue, not with those big phrases that are very disconnected, but tangible? It's like, what do you gain by doing this? Another theory that I heard just recently, like, oh, I should incorporate into work. And it was about, I'm sort of a little bit of a health freak, which I know you said that you were wearing exercise clothes before, so I know you exercise. I want to hear about that. But I heard about healthy eating habits, and one of the series, I would love to credit actually her, but I forget the name now, unfortunately. But anyway, the theory was, don't try to take something away from people that is bad for them. Try to introduce something that is good. So basically they don't have space for the bad, and you're sort of trying to introduce good step by step. So bad is just out of place. And how can we sort of do that in our work, also environmental sustainability? So the thought just came up to me this morning. So I'm still sort of mulling it over, how we can, like, no, take a walk, buy a good product versus bad products, drink water versus Coke. I don't know, you talking about Koch brothers and how horrible they are. Well, don't buy their products. That's simple. But anyway, what do you do to sustain yourself? Because the amount of work you do, honestly, you're one of those people. I'm like, how does he get it all done? And you respond always almost immediately, and everything is like documents and bylaws. I'm like, how does he do that? So how do you do it? How do you keep yourself sharp and on point?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for that fully, but I'm trying. So with me moving recently, I am trying to get a little more focused. I'm setting up my workspaces to be more conducive to self-care in a lot of ways, like standing desk. Like how can I have some movement when I am, whether it's my day job work, and whether it's my Sierra Club activities, or this coming Monday, I'm going to hopefully do a public speaking thing with our Denver City Council on
Nice.
accessible housing. So like how do I do it all? I just stay, I've been determined, I think. Um, I think I've always been determined, but Donald Trump put a new perspective on things, on why I need to be a little bit more focused. And then couple that with, wow, I don't want to let my guard down again. So even with Biden in
Mm.
office, even with a governor I agree with more in Colorado and a legislature that I agree with more, people still need to be held accountable. We can't just uh, go back to the days of not worrying. I think that we continually have to worry. And I um, am trying to balance the need of staying healthy. I get up at like early in the morning. I try and get all my steps in every day. I
How early? How early
I
is
get up
early for you? 5:30?
5:30 in the morning. Yeah,
Ooh,
that's my wake up, my normal. When it gets warmer out, it might get a little earlier, so I can go running before work.
ay,
But
ay.
I try to, you know, friends, we're still trying to meet up outside on hikes, and I'm actually got a river float trip that I will not be able to reply to any emails at the end of April because I will be on a river, on the Colorado River for like 6 days, and it will be wonderful. And I will not have email or text messages or anything. So um, those are moments that I look
Amazing.
forward to. I love spending time with friends. COVID has really made that a challenge, of course. And I'm
Hmm.
really looking forward to doing karaoke again because that's a really good stress reliever.
So you sing.
Yes, I will. I'm not a great singer, but I love doing karaoke. It's fun to do. So
It is fun to do, but I have to say, I mean, every time I did it, I'm like, oh my God. I performed also on stage, not for singing necessarily, but more of a sort of whatever fun comedy, stand-up comedy type of thing, or theater. So, but singing for me is like, yeah, it's fun, but I need a lot of alcohol before I can feel comfortable. Yeah, that's true. Chris, I appreciate you. We're coming to the end, but anything that you want to add that I didn't ask you, or you want to leave people with, that's something that yeah, you think is important?
yeah, I think the last thing I would want to share with folks overall is stay curious. Let's all work better at not making assumptions, treat each other with kindness. That can be hard sometimes. Even it's not just about a political divides, it's within our own circles. um,
It's true.
and don't if you have the time, support a cause still. I know it's hard times right now, but I think the most critical thing is also to care for yourself. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. That's what we learn in first aid. You can't help others unless you're helping yourself. And you might be going through a health issue, you might be going through a financial issue, you might be just going through other personal issues. um, and reach out, and take care of yourself, because a lot of people have experienced a lot of trauma the last 4 years with what's happened nationally, and that's going to linger for some time, and some of that rhetoric is not going away in the short term, and we need to be vigilant, and just help one another and stay active if we're able to, because it's going to take all of us to move the ball forward.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, words of wisdom. And I found that, in 2020, I have to say, we're probably preaching to the choir, but volunteering and serving, I think that's those were the things that kept me definitely afloat and beat and preoccupied and centered through all of those adversities that we all experience. So I think that you're absolutely right. serving in any capacity you can and helping other people, redirecting your attention on others, I think is important. So Chris, I love you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate. I didn't even expect where this conversation took us, but I truly appreciate it. I want to continue. So thank you so much. I appreciate your openness and desire to share.
Great. Well, thank you,
So
Olga, for having me, and Zypher for setting this Zoom up. So
yeah, Zephyr is helping us on the back end. Thank you so much, Zephyr. Yes, our SF Bay area chapter, wonderful staff person. So thank you. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Until next Friday, stay safe, stay healthy, take good care of yourself and your loved ones, everybody around you. Smile a little bit more and just be grateful. Okay, thank you. Bye.